The antidote.
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 Y estás escuchando The Antidote.
The antidote.
The antidote.
The antidote.
You're listening to The Antidote with Dave Hawkins.
With Christian music that doesn't suck.
And this is The Antidote with Dave Hawkins. I always find it interesting how many more listeners of The Antidote actually come from the United States compared to Canada. So maybe I should explain to our American listeners that yes, here in the Great White North, we do love metal. Even metal styles that might be considered more extreme. So I thought it was time to pull in some Canadian metal artists who also happen to be Christian. At the half-hour point, we go to the town of Quesnel, British Columbia, home of death metalers Cruentis. But first, I keep this a little bit closer to home here in Ontario, as we pull in the small Ontario town band Outrage AD. Martin, Nick, and Nick of Outrage AD join The Antidote. Thanks for coming for a talk, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Nick and Nick, do you guys ever mix each other up?
All the time. So there's Nick with a K and Nick with a C.
And that's how you actually announce each other. This is Nick K, this is Nick C.
That's right. Actually, Nicholas, but with one with an H, one without the H. So yeah, we just differentiate the Nick like that.
Your band has been described as pioneers of Christian death metal. We're talking about the early 90s. Were there other Christian artists doing this kind of thing back then?
Mortification.
Mortification, Believer was a big influence on us.
Seventh Angel?
Seventh Angel for you, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, because the band started probably like 90 or 91.
Yeah, the band started and it was just for fun, and we were just playing in the basement to impress the 3 girls that live in my village. 2 of them were my cousins, so the other one was obviously my girlfriend, and I just started making music because I didn't want to play other people's music. I wanted to do my own, so I started making some music, and one of my friends from high school, he wrote a lot of poetry, and he just decided, hey, let's put that on that song. And then Nick with a K heard that we were without a drummer because the drummer we had to move somewhere. So he came down, and he went to the same high school as my girlfriend. So he came down and we started jamming. And then one day he said, hey, why don't we turn this into a Christian band? And I'm like, great. We all went to church every Sunday and we were all Christians. And
instead of having the blood and guts, it said that every other band we were listening to did. It said, hey, why not have just something different, a bit more positive, and that pertained to a lot of people out there.
So we had a lot of songs that had kind of meaningless vocals, and then Nick started writing Christian-based songs, and they fit really well. I don't think we ever thought twice about it. We just kept on going and kept writing, and everything was Christian-themed. And the fun thing is that because we went to 2 different high schools, we had that many more kids that would come to our shows, and they never thought anything bad about it being Christian. And the fact that, when we did the reunion, they were still singing the lyrics, and so it is pretty cool.
Well, that was something I was curious about, because, of course, you'd mentioned that Outrage AD came from small-town Ontario. Death metal, it couldn't have been too common there. But your music and the message were accepted?
Oh, yeah, but the fun thing about death metal is that we didn't think we could sing very well, so doing the death metal thing was, to us, easier, and I'm a huge Sacrifice fan, so I like that more screamish, high-pitch, and Nick really liked the death metal, so our voices kind of blend in well, because it wasn't the same. You could tell the difference when I'm singing versus when he's singing, so we thought it meshed well. And later on we made bands that we had cleaner vocals and we were a bit more open with the way our voices sound, because we always wanted to do it ourselves. And the more people you add in a band, it's like, you have more issues, especially when you live in a small town. So he can't make it because he lives an hour away. He can't make it, and this and that. So by just being like a 3-piece is very easy, and then we just relied on ourselves to do the vocals.
You guys, even with the Christian message, you couldn't have been playing churches. I mean, they would have stoned the band.
Now, back in the day, that was the thing, is you could rent halls and, little areas that can host 300, 400 people, and we would pack it. My high school was, almost 2,000 students, and Nick's high school was like, what?
Just 200.
200, but
we were both Catholic kind of high schools, so all the kids would appreciate the message.
Oh, and we always had themes. One time we baptized the crowd. One time we would have somebody recreating the crucifixions. We always had fun. I mean, almost everybody kind of had a part in there. We always have, our friends would come down and they would help with the lights, or they would help with the sound, or they would, I'll do this, I'll do that. So it was kind of like just a gathering, and it was really fun.
We were 14. Art was 14 on bass. Mart was 15. I was 16. I was the only one with a driver's license. The fact that we were teenagers, for the fact that the voice, we tried to do a few like grungy songs, because the grunge was getting bigger at that point, and you're developing, so you have all this weird voice. So we said, we'll wait till we're finished growing to do the clean stuff, but we'll do the Chris Barnes stuff for now.
I'm going to do a really lame segue because I was talking about stoning, but being stoned is part of one of your songs, Unreal Trip, which gets into substance abuse.
But that's an anti. That's the thing. I've actually never did a drug in my life, and I don't think Nick either.
No, not illegal. Which by now won't be something really big next year when that becomes legal anyways. Yeah. But we decided not to go that way. We were actually quite straight edge back then.
Very.
We enjoy a nice beverage now. But back then we didn't do like anything at all. It just.
But I think that was the biggest bond, because back then, if you didn't drink or do drugs, it was kind of like, yeah, you're an outcast. And me and Nick really bonded over the fact that we like Pepsi. We freaking love Pepsi.
Just like the Melvins.
And we really bonded over the fact that, because there's no peer pressure, if your friend doesn't do it, you don't do it. And you're fine with that. And it was like, oh my God. So we used to talk every night, hang out every other night, and play Frisbee till 5 in the morning, and just do, really immature but legal stuff.
It seems like with the song that you were trying to take on the role of a teacher, instructing people on what not to do.
Yes. Yeah. Back then it was more direct. You know how even like the whole church system went from many years ago being very, don't do this, don't do that. And we were obviously brought up that way in a sense, and it became a bit more liberal now, so you don't have to dictate so much, which is why some of the last few songs, especially the ones on the album, which were in a later date, they're not so much direct teenager kind of like, don't do this.
I brought up the point of death and thrash not being a part of the Christian music scene in the early 90s. Was that Christian message really the main reason for the music of the band, or was that just coincidental?
I think it came later on, but the thing is that once we decided to play on that theme, we were really all in. We were like, geez, this is like the best thing that we could ever do with it. Because then you stand out a little more, and for us it was our values. It was like, well, this is the right way to go. But when we got into the Christian writing, we actually thought a lot more of what we were saying. And I think that when Nick, without the K, wrote New Blood, he really took a theme and made this like great song about a new Christian thing that we never explored. And it's really, freaking love that song.
We're here talking about New Blood, which is a great title for the release, but really, you guys could have called it Old Blood. It's been 25 years.
26 now.
Why was it that it took you guys so long to put this out as an official release?
Funny story. So,
I think that's the key question of the whole interview.
It's because of Nick without the K there. We had, 5 projects. One was me and Nick with the K. We had 5 things. So we had a acoustic duo. We had a alternative 3-piece. We had Outrage. We had a French-Canadian band. But I was reviving our French-Canadian band because I lived in the Middle East for 8 years, and I was missing my French. So in order for me to get back in my groove, I started writing again for my French band. And then Nick were talking, and Nick was saying, oh yeah, we should revive this French thing. And then Nick says, no, you should revive Outrage. So it's really because of him saying, you should probably revive that stuff, because to be honest, I haven't thought of Outrage in a long time as a relevant thing. But as you go back in history, we are one of the first to actually be doing that as a death metal act. And it was, it's humbling now, 25 years later. But back then, we didn't think anything of it. We weren't doing it to be the first, that's for sure.
I think coming from the outside of this band, and I got to know these guys really later on, Outrage was really something that I would see as being, first and foremost, very genuine. And being a big fan of Mortification and understanding where the first wave of Christian death metal came from, I think there was something with Outrage that was just like a pure gem, especially as you mentioned earlier, coming from a small town in Canada. Who would expect that? And I think that was first and foremost, like, for me, something to say, like, you guys, like, have something that maybe you're not realizing. And you have great songs, you have a great theme, you have, everything there. Why not revive that? And from there, it's Nick with a K that talked about it and convinced Martin to just revive it.
Before we get through with this thing, we may uncover sins that even the devil would be ashamed of.
The song New Blood from Outrage AD. Coming up next, we hear from the band talking about their lyrics and how the original recordings were done. Nick with a K, I'm going to center you out for a minute. One of your emails that you sent to me, you sounded almost apologetic about the songs, telling me that you guys were just kids when they were recorded. Why apologize for them?
Yeah. About the lyrics, yes. It's childish lyrics, but we're proud of what that was back then, and we're still proud. But you just say, yeah, sorry. Sometimes people ask for the lyrics, and we'll say, I'm not sure. Like, I'll send you Dreams Unto Reality and Death Row, because I thought those two were pretty much before New Blood the best written song, because they were near the end, and we were becoming mature, and so maybe going on 18 or something like that.
Lyric-wise, mostly.
Yeah, it was lyric-wise. The music itself is good.
And that's what you would revamp, say, if you were going to start Outrage AD from scratch?
Yeah, because we still listen to the old school death thrash. We love that old school sound, because as much as I like death metal, I find it really hard to get into the newer bands, which are so technical, fast, crazy, so well produced that it overproduce. And so you can listen to this album, the Outrage New Blood, and you can see there's nothing perfect about it. It's fine, it's raw, it's normal, so we're happy with that.
Yeah, we wanted it to sound like back in the day. So when we started this, there was only cassettes, there was no CDs. And we always thought, man, if we had started this and CDs were available, it'd be a totally different story. That's the reality of today, is you can record an album in your house now, but back in the day it wasn't possible. So we had tapes, and back then fanzines were the big thing, and we sold tapes in Germany and Mexico. Australia. We had a little map of all the places that would buy our tapes, and seriously, those tapes were terrible. Terrible. Seriously, they were just like, oh my god, what is this noise? But yeah, I'm very happy with the sound of the album.
Something that is old on New Blood, and it comes out on some of the songs like Death Crow, is that you bring in sound bites from an old horror movie.
Okay, let me explain this. This is something I've been wanting for 25 years. When we were recording, I think the second demo back in the day, Les Exorcistos from White Zombie came out. And so we would record the songs, we'd do this, but we'd always listen to the album. And having a fascination with horror movies and loving the sample on that, I said, one day I want one like that. And so you go and do a full circle of getting where White Zombie got their name from, the movie White Zombie, with Bela Lugosi, which has an amazing voice, right, for this. All the samples all throughout for that same movie, White Zombie, which is a really cool movie.
You gotta be honest. That's a terrible movie.
But the sound bites are
But the sound bites are incredible.
Bela Lugosi's voice, man.
Oh my god. His voice is so haunting. Oh, jeez.
I can't imagine that Outrage AD is going to stay the same. Now that you're back, now that you've signed to Nosral Recordings, what's the plan for the future of the band?
Well, we have a few songs left from some of our first two demos that are still pertinent, and we just didn't feel like putting them on this year. So we have some stuff that we still find is great songs nowadays. So probably 2-3 of those going on the next recording, but also now it's going to be more newer stuff. So we're going to try and blend it all together, and then by the time if we pull out a third one, this would be all fresh at that point.
Guys, thanks for coming for this talk with The Antidote, and best of luck with the music of Outrage AD.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Amen.
I hope you all appreciate the music out there. Thanks for your support.
Oh, my darling. What have they done to you? My friend, they are the angels of death. You, my friend, they are the angels of death. You, my friend, they are the angels of death.
This is Martin,
Nick,
And Nick.
from Outrage AD, and you are listening to The Antidote.
This day reverses darkness. In light the people lead. He comes among all evilness. The birds of life you will see. Death crow.
From the old horror movie fans, Outrage AD, that was Death Crow, along with a little bit of help from Bela Lugosi. Now it's time to meet another band who's also on the label Nosral Recordings. Here comes my conversation with Cruentis. Tyler and Jess front British Columbia's Cruentis. Thanks for coming to The Antidote, guys.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I went for a look on the net and found that the band name Cruentis comes from Latin, and it roughly translates as full of blood. How does the name represent the band?
Well, it's basically got a little bit of a double meaning. As you know, we're a Christian band, so the primary meaning is it just represents all of us as Christians, stained in the blood of Christ. At the same time, we're also believe we're fighting in a battle. So we're blood-stained warriors, stained with the blood of our enemies as well. It's kind of where it came from.
It's quite rare for a Canadian band to bring Christian faith into their music. There's no question that Cruentis does that. Is it important for you to share your faith?
Absolutely. I'd say that the inspiration for our music is very much based on our faith. I know for myself personally, the inspiration for all my writing, I think I owe to God directly for giving us, well, me specifically, the abilities and talents to be able to create. I always feel the need to create, and that stems from my faith specifically. And for me personally, it comes out in the form of death metal.
Okay, admit. You go to church and you tell everybody that you do Christian death metal, and they look at you as if you've got horns growing from your head?
Actually, surprisingly not. But there was one time actually where we had this church function. We were outside on the field outside the church, and there's a little stage set up, and we had live music playing, to attract a bit of a crowd. And near the end of the day, we just asked, like, hey, can we just play our own stuff? And they were like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So we just played a few of our death metal songs, and yeah, a lot of people actually enjoyed it, surprisingly.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's another odd point about Cruentis also. Coming from Quesnel, BC, I would have expected a guitar strumming folk band to come from there, not melodic death metal. So seriously, does your style make you the town oddity?
I'd say so. Surprisingly, there is quite a large metal community up here. I think everywhere you go, you find people who are interested in metal, but it's definitely not the genre of choice around these parts.
That would be country.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Twanging guitar stuff, I'll pass. Okay, you got to give us the roots of Cruentis. How did it all begin?
Well, basically 5 years ago, 7 years ago now. Seems like a long time, but...
It would have been 7, yeah.
I'd been playing on my own for quite some time with my own projects. And Jess moved to Canada from South Africa.
Sure. I mean, I didn't have much say in the matter at the time. I was 16 at the time, so I moved with my parents. And my parents had visited before, and they had met Tyler, and they found out that he played World of Warcraft, which they confused for a different game that I played. So like, you should be friends with this guy. He plays the same games you do. Turns out he didn't, but then we discovered that we both liked metal. And I happened to play bass, and Tyler played guitar, so like, hey, we should jam. So Tyler had a kind of a project going, right? When did you start Destroy the Abomination?
Oh, long time ago, probably 10 years ago. Definitely was nothing like what Cruentis had.
No, not really. It was a very, I would say, lo-fi, brutal death metal. As you could probably guess by the name, Destroy the Abomination. Yeah, so then at one stage we started recording some things and we decided, we could actually do something with this. So we did. We started recording it. We put out a song as Destroy the Abomination. And a little while after that, we decided that we really wanted to play something a little more melodic, We decided we wanted a fresh start, and so we came up with a new name and started recording new stuff.
Our influences were different, too. I was, at the time, more into thrash and just really heavy death metal, old school stuff. And Jess, his preference was more towards the mellow death stuff and the more melodic stuff a little more than mine. So that's how we kind of, I think, meshed our sound out. When you listen to our stuff, you can hear the brutality, but there's also the melodic stuff. So I think it kind of creates a unique mesh. We listen to a ton of metal when we're in the writing process, and it's always kind of changing this way and that. On the new album, I'd say there's a lot more broad spectrum of metal genres that kind of influenced its way in there. So hard to really even say now what's influencing me these days, but I'm fortunate to have a computer job where I can listen to music all day long. So
I think with this album, as far as influences go, I definitely think with Alpha and Omega, we did start to find a little bit of our own sound, and we still listen to stuff, and we obviously still draw inspiration from all across the spectrum from different bands, but I think we really started to find our own sound and really just wrote what the songs wanted, I guess, as opposed to what we were listening to at the time.
You'll hear more of the conversation with Cruentis in a moment. For now, here's a first taste of their music. From their Cold Stone release is Path of Anathema. You brought up the point about your 2016, your debut release, Cold Stone. I mean, really, I guess you could call it an EP since it has 7 songs, but I mean, it's 3/4 of an hour long. It's a full album length. It starts off with a killer track, Path of Anathema. By using that song to lead off the release, were you trying to make a statement?
I mean, to be totally honest, it kind of just worked out that we felt after writing that song fit first slot, more on a musical point with the intro and the way it breaks into that lead. But I think the album as a whole, and a lot of our lyric writing, you'll find that common theme. We write a lot about the perspective of an individual and what it is to be human and what it is to struggle with spiritual battles and the choices we make of, you know, do we take the narrow path or the widened road, right?
And that's what made me curious about this, is because the music scene is tough for any band. But an artist who brings Christianity into their music has an even more difficult time. Has that ever been the situation for Cruentis?
There definitely is, especially in the metal community, kind of an aversion to Christian themes, just because I suppose it's seen as, I guess, cool to be evil when it comes to metal, you know? So we're kind of the opposite of that. We basically was like, yes, we're really uncool. Listen to our music, you know? So yeah. I think a lot of times there is a little bit of that, but I wouldn't say that's the overwhelming response. Those types of people tend to be kind of on the fringes, I think. Most people just listen to the music for the music's sake, and they won't care about the lyrics so much, I think, if they're not Christians themselves.
Does it make you sad to realize that that's the case? About the lyrics being ignored?
Yes and no. I think if someone who is not a Christian listens to our music at all, I think that's a win in my books, because then maybe they'll hear the lyrics at some point, read them, and they might, who knows what seeds are planted and what might happen in the future, you know? They've heard our message, so that's, I guess our job is done at that point.
I just want to add to that. Yeah, like, you know, I can't count how many times people I know personally find out that I'm in a death metal band, and at first they're like, oh, that's interesting. You in a death metal band? But when they find out that it's Christian, it kind of adds it's a testimony. I get this feeling that it's people are getting the impression, oh, you know, maybe this Christianity thing isn't just all about dressing fancy and going to church, and it's more real. People can see that we're real people. I mean, we're screaming on these records and just like pouring our hearts out and our thoughts. And I think that it's a good testimony. Personally, I haven't seen or met anybody who's listened to our music and who's had a negative view on it because it's Christian. You might get comments and stuff like that online from people, but you know, you're going to get that with any music regardless.
Yeah, it's true, because I think in my experience, when people find out I'm in a death metal band, and then they tell them it's a Christian death metal band, most of them would, their response would be that they didn't even know that was a thing. They thought it was an oxymoron. You can't have Christian death metal, you know? So it does change their mind about it. And like Tyler said, I think that's kind of a big goal for us, is to change people's minds. Firstly, change some Christian people's minds about metal and show them, you know, this comes straight from our hearts too. And it's just as valid a type of a band for a Christian to be in as a worship band. And also to change non-Christians' minds about Christianity, and so they can see we're normal people, we can make good music too, you know?
You guys brought out Cold Stone, which was an independent release. For your new EP, Alpha and Omega, you joined a new label, Nosral Recordings. Does being on a label change things for Cruentis?
It definitely does in a lot of ways. On one hand, we really wanted to go on a label. I felt like personally, and Jess can speak for himself, but I felt personally that being on a label gives you some more credibility. It's really hard to promote your own music. And so, yeah, we put it out there to see if there were any labels that wanted to pick us up, and Nosral was interested, and so we decided to move down that direction. I also wanted to focus more on the music and just creating the music and spending the time on making sure it's that side of things is covered and letting the label do the behind the scenes work of promotion and distribution and all that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely different. I think I could compare it to something else that was a first for us with this album, with just working with a producer. When you work with a producer for the first time, you really have to wrap your head around the fact that some outsider that doesn't know your music, doesn't know where it comes from, doesn't know what you were thinking when you wrote the song, they're going to come in and point their finger at everything they think is wrong and tell you to change it, you know. And you got to be okay with that, because that's the reason you bring them in, you know. You want the outside perspective, so you got to kind of surrender a lot of control that way. And I mean, the producer that we worked with, she was great. We're all really happy with the results, but working with the label is kind of the same thing. It's hard in some ways, because you have to take your music, say, here, this belongs to you now, do what you want with it, and then let them do their thing, which is tough. But at the same time, it is nice. You know, we can focus more on the music, we can do our own thing. Being a control freak myself, it's hard to, you know, relinquish control to other people, but it's getting done, you know, the music's going to be put out there, and we haven't really had to do much on that front, so it's good.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Jess of Cruentis. And you've got The Antidote with Dave Hawkins.
The angel said to me, his words are faithful and true. The Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, has sent his angel to show sons what is soon to take place. Behold, I am come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give to each person according to what he has done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and
I said it during the interview, and I'll say it again. That's a killer title track. Alpha and Omega from Cruentis. Tonight's episode hasn't meant to be a battle of the band. But what has been cool is to be able to meet with two bands that are both death metal, but each have a style that's very different from each other. And don't worry about picking your favorite, because make it easy on yourself and go and get both of the releases on Bandcamp. Something you haven't heard tonight is the complete interviews from Outrage AD and Cruentis, but you can get those on theantidoteradio.com. Next time on The Antidote, I speak with a guy who's a huge deal in the punk scene, Wiley Willis of 2 Minute Minor. So be sure to tune in as we premiere the band's sophomore release, Blood on Our Front Stoop. To finish up, here's more from Cruentis and the song All Hail Nothing, and we'll see you again next time on The Antidote. The title track from Alpha and Omega is superb. Obviously, the song name comes from describing Christ and is out of the book of Revelation. Is the Bible your source for all of your lyrics?
No, not all, I wouldn't say. Not directly, at least. I think Tyler can speak more on this when I've said this, because I think he writes more straight from the Bible. I tend to write either I'll be inspired by a verse and I'll kind of paraphrase it or something like that. I personally rarely will take something out of scripture and make that the lyrics. How I tend to write is more of a personal experience from my life, kind of what's going on. So I would say with the way I write lyrics, I don't even necessarily go into it with like I'm writing a Christian song, so I need to have these things in the lyrics. It's just that I live my life as a Christian, then I write songs about stuff that happens in my life that just kind of naturally happens, you know? I think it helps make it a bit more real and emotional, I guess.
With my writing and the songs that I spend more kind of my writing on, I'd say Alpha and Omega and also The Blood That Divides. Those two songs are probably the most grounded in actual written scripture. I can't actually think of any other songs that have word-for-word scripture, and I could be wrong. I tend to write all my lyrics very firmly supported by scripture, and I will read a lot of scripture when I am writing, and I'll be inspired by it, but a lot of my lyrics I'm writing from my personal perspective or from the perspective of a character. With a lot of the songs on Alpha and Omega are written from the perspective of a character who's dealing with different things, and I think that comes through in the lyrics.
Well, I'd also like to get into one of the shorter tracks from Alpha and Omega, All Hail Nothing. It talks about the god of dung. You've got to explain that.
Well, I wrote the lyrics to All Hail Nothing. The god of dung, that is... Someone told me this. I didn't fact check, so it could be completely not true. But I don't care. It sounded cool, so I used it in the song. Apparently, the god of dung is a rough translation of the name Beelzebub, which is one of the Bible's names for Satan. So I just thought that was cool. It's like, I don't know. It's a nice insult. I thought it was a good contrast to the song Alpha and Omega. Basically, Alpha and Omega is about God and how awesome he is and how scary and powerful and everything. And then there's Satan on the other side. You know, he's the god of dung. He's nothing really. So it's like, oh, here comes the king, you know, all hail, nothing. It's just kind of a satirical, mocking kind of song, I guess.
I looked up your hometown of Quesnel on Wikipedia. It has a list of notable residents, and all of them are hockey players. So I got to know, is Alpha and Omega going to put Cruentis on the notable residents list?
Certainly hope so.
What do you think it will take to make you guys really stand out in the metal scene? I mean, obviously the music caliber is there, but how do you get noticed?
That's a good question. I think, we've struggled from the beginning because of our location primarily, and secondly, because of, our genre and with the lyrics being Christian. It's very difficult to keep a full lineup together. We've had drummers, but, we need a solid drummer to join our ranks so that we can play shows more often and travel. I think playing live music really gets you out there. People want to see you play. The more we can do that, the better.
Thanks so much for coming on The Antidote, guys, and best of luck with Alpha and Omega.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us.